Hello and welcome to our presentation of the Geography of Life. I'm Allison and I will be doing the first half of our presentation while Nicole will be doing the second half. So let's get started. To begin, let's talk a little bit about Mas a Tierra, or Robinson Crusoe Island. Mas a Tierra is an island in the Juan Fernandez group. It is isolated and home to many endemic species. Endemic species are species found nowhere else in the world but that one place. So Mas a Tierra has species found there that are not found anywhere else. So let's discuss what is and isn't there. The island has 126 species of plants, 5 species of birds, a fur seal, and some insects that are found nowhere else. But what is missing? Well, there are no native amphibians, reptiles, or mammals. See, at the bottom you can see the Juan Fernandez firecrown, a species of hummingbird endemic to the island. Why are all these things missing? And how do we explain this? Well, let's talk about biogeography. Biogeography is the study of how species are distributed on Earth. Biogeography seeks to answer these two questions. Why are islands so unique in terms of their species? And why are mammals in Australia marsupials, while elsewhere mammals are placentals? First, let's back up a little and talk about what Darwin thought was the reason for endemic species. Darwin's theory was that the distribution of species is due to evolution. Species disperse and evolve into new species over time. The Earth is also changing. But was Darwin completely right? Well, mostly, except now we know about continental drift and taxonomy. Darwin did not know how drastically the Earth had changed, or for how long it has been changing. Plus, now we can find DNA and protein sequences, and those can show us evolutionary relationships in the times when they diverged from ancestors. So, can a species native to one continent do well on another in a similar habitat? The answer is yes. Different species can fill the same roles. Take a prickly pear cactus and it will thrive in Australia, even though Australia's common succulent is the euphorbia. On the left you see the prickly pear, and on the right you see the euphorbia. They can function in the same type of environment. Similarly, marsupials and placentals have some key differences, such as their reproductive systems, but they are similar in other respects. The sugar glider, a marsupial, is like the flying squirrel, a placental. The marsupial mole is like a placental mole, and the banded anteater, a marsupial, is like the placental anteater. On the right, you can see the sugar glider, which is a marsupial, and on the bottom right, you can see a flying squirrel, which is a placental. How do we explain this? Well, what is convergent evolution? Convergent evolution means species that live in similar habitats will experience similar pressures of selection. They may evolve similarly or converge. Although unrelated, they will look and behave similarly. The examples of this are the cacti and euphorbs, sugar gliders and flying squirrels, etc. Convergent evolution shows common ancestry, speciation, and natural selection working in tandem. Here are a few definitions. Speciation is the process in which a common ancestor gives rise to a multitude of different descendants. Natural selection makes a species well adapted to the environment it lives in. And common ancestry explains why marsupials share common features with each other and why placentals share different common features with each other. So, how did marsupials get to Australia? Well, the marsupials were able to move on the supercontinent of Gondwana. Later, Gondwana broke apart, and the marsupials were left on what is now known as Australia. There is evidence of this. The evidence is that the tip of South America would have been connected to Antarctica, so marsupials had to have gone through Antarctica, so one would expect fossils to be found there. Sure enough, scientists found marsupial fossils dating 35 to 40 million years old in Antarctica. Something important to note is that continents move. Trees, for instance, do not migrate from continent to continent. Rather, the continents themselves move. We know that continents move due to plate tectonics, in which a plate, a large mass of solid rock, travels over the lower molten layers of Earth. Plate tectonics explains why many species are where they are today, and why fossils of marine creatures can be found in places far from water. Next, we will discuss the evidence for evolution from patterns of life on islands.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and I will be presenting the second half of our presentation, The Geography of Life. The topic I will be covering is the distribution of species on islands, specifically continental and oceanic islands. Evidence that evolution has occurred is seen in the way species are distributed on islands compared to the mainland. Some islands lack native species that are on continents. There are two types of islands, continental and oceanic islands. First, let's talk about continental islands. These islands were once connected to the mainland, but became separated due to rising sea levels or continental drift. The British Isles, Japan, and Madagascar are a few examples. For example, Madagascar is considered a continental island because it used to be connected to Africa 160 million years ago. On the other hand, oceanic islands were not connected to any continent ever before, but instead arose from the seafloor as growing volcanoes. Therefore, no living creatures existed on these islands before. The Hawaiian Islands and the Galapagos Archipelago are just a few examples. First, I will be going over the distribution of species on oceanic islands. Some may ask, why are there certain species on continents and continental islands that don't exist on any oceanic islands, such as amphibians, land mammals, and freshwater fish? The reason is that mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and freshwater fish can't disperse long distances to reach oceanic islands. Some may also ask, why are certain species only seen on these islands, such as insects, plants, and birds? The reason is that insects, plants, and birds can disperse long distances. Birds and insects can fly these long distances, while plants get there as seeds floating across the ocean, or if they are stuck on birds who fly there. Some species can make their destinations through taking rides on rafts. For example, 15 iguanas on the Caribbean island of Anguilla arrived there through these rafts, which probably arrived there through a hurricane. Trees are rare because their seeds don't usually make it to the islands because they can't float. Overall, the species seen on oceanic islands are the ones that can disperse there and come from the nearest mainland. Now, we will see why some species occur abundantly in oceanic islands. Species on oceanic islands descended from their ancestors, who colonized the islands from nearby continents. These colonists radiated and formed many species because of lack of competitors and predators that otherwise would diminish their numbers, as seen on the continents. For example, Hawaii has a radiation of honey creepers. Lastly, I will go over the distribution of species on continental islands. Continental islands have many species seen on the continent from which they split. For example, Great Britain shares many species seen in Europe, the mainland it got separated from. Extremely old continental islands look more like they fall between continental islands and oceanic islands because they lack some species, such as primates, that evolved later and so were never part of the continental island. For example, New Zealand has species related to its mainland, since it's a continental island, but also had a radiation of 11 species of moas, which would be seen on oceanic islands. In conclusion, biogeography shows that evolution is the reason for the diversity seen on continental and oceanic islands. This also depends on chance, because animals and plants that disperse to these islands get there by chance by the currents and winds that take them there. Eventually, they colonize the islands and create the life we see there today.